This is Julie Murphy with Arizona Farm Bureau. It's Friday and we're doing Talk to a Farmer, Talk to a Rancher, Talk to in my book, Famous Winemakers. And today I'm with Michael Pierce. And I'm going to give a little introduction because I want everybody that joins us on the live and then watches this later, everything you can possibly know about Bodega Pierce. So Bodega Pierce is a family-owned winery based in Wilcox. And we're not in Wilcox, we're in Clarksdale today, but known for producing high quality wines that showcase the unique terroir of the Wilcox Binge. I love that phrase, the Wilcox Binge. Founded in 2011 by Dan and Barbara Pierce, along with their son, Michael. Your dad was going to be here, but we're missing him, so tell him hi for us.
I sure will.
Okay. Yeah. The winery operates an 80-acre estate vineyard, Rolling View Vineyard, and again, that's down in Wilcox, correct? Mm-hmm. Where they grow 18 different grape varieties. That's one of the fun things that Joel Carr is with me today, behind the scenes, making sure everything happens. One of the fun things that Joel and I have discovered is all of the grape varieties that even one family vineyard is growing, and 18 in your group. Both Dan and Michael hold viticulture and enology degrees. Did I say that right?
Yeah. Right.
From Washington State University, and bring extensive experience from working at wineries in the United States and internationally. Son Michael was named 40 under 40. I got that bit of information from your mom.
Yeah,
I love
she
your
would tell
mom.
you that. I wouldn't tell you that.
But Mom told me. I'm so glad I looped her into my emails. So you were named 40 under 40 winemakers in 2020 by Wine Enthusiast, which again is a big time publication in the wine industry, correct?
I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah. The winery emphasizes crafting wines that reflect the high desert terroir, aiming to deliver consistent, high-quality products to Arizona wine enthusiasts, myself being one of them. Bodega Pierce has 2 tasting rooms, and I'm giving this information so that we know where to go. One in Wilcox, and that's open Thursday through Sunday, 11 to 5 p.m., and by appointment. Monday through Wednesday. And then here where we're at, here in Clarksdale, you're open Thursday through Sunday, 12 to 6. You offer wine tastings and events like wine and food pairings and private gatherings. So let's see, today's Friday, so you guys are going to be open.
Yeah, we'll be open.
Yeah. Ooh, maybe we should stay later now. Driving the company cars. Can't drink any wine today. The winery has earned accolades, including the Bodega Pierce 2018 Chardonnay, recognized as one of the Wine Business Monthly's 2020 Hot Brands, AZ Central's 2023 wine competition that included the Growers Cup and the Best Rosé, the 2021 Pinot Noir Rosé, and the Double Gold Growers Cup and Best Dessert Wine. And 2018, I know I'm not going to say this right, Omerta, yeah. Omerta, Best in Class 2020 Merlot. Finally, Bodega Pierce also operates a wine club with silver, gold, and platinum tiers. This is very common with a lot of the wine families here in Arizona and actually across the United States. One of the best ways to discover wine and what they're doing here is to join the wine club, so I would highly encourage that. Offering exclusive wines and event access under both the Bodega Pierce and the
Seculum.
Say it again.
Seculum.
Cellars, and that's your other label. And latter being Michael's boutique label featuring specialty wines like your orange wine. Dan, Michael, and Barbara, all 3 of you have or are serving on the Arizona Wine Growers Association, correct?
Yeah, at different times.
At different times.
We tried to help out. And
it's all in the family.
For me, yes, it's very much all in the family.
So I learned so much every time I talk to all of you. And this is probably something I should have known, but I ask you, and I'm assuming maybe there's somebody that's going to watch today or watch the video later. I ask you why Bodega Pierce. Obviously, Pierce is your last name, so that makes sense to name the winery after the family name. But what is the bodega in front of it?
Well, in the Spanish winery tradition, bodega would be kind of the house of that name.
Okay.
So it's Bodega Pierce. If you see some Spanish wines, you might see bodegas and then the family name. So
we know that we're drinking the family wine.
Mm-hmm.
That's so
Quite
cool.
literally, yeah.
Yeah. So I always start out by asking the Genesis question. What inspired the Pierce family to do this? Obviously, you and your dad went to school but for this, but what inspired it?
It wasn't really that much of a conscious thing. It was a hobby into an education, into like, I hear you can do this, you can travel. And then it's like, well, let's get a job. Let's start getting paid to do this. And then it's like, well, maybe we could see ourselves doing this. Where could we see ourselves doing it? So it was kind of an evolution over a handful of years. And now we just celebrated, this is our 15th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And that was after we kind of went through that Genesis period of deciding Arizona is a good place to do this. I've been in Arizona my whole life, and my parents have been here most of theirs.
Okay.
We had worked elsewhere. I was in Oregon, my dad was in Washington, and we thought, maybe there's some established places up there we could, find a home, but we're not from there. Arizona at the time is a little bit more of a blank canvas, and we could go there and kind of have our own mark on things. And so we decided to look around. Wilcox was a great place for a number of technical reasons for growing wine grapes. We were lucky enough to find a property that has been our home now.
How many acres in wine grapes of those 18 varieties are growing in Wilcox?
There's about 30 some acres.
Yeah.
Active acres, yeah.
Awesome. Grapes, they're high value, especially when you add value to them by creating a high value product, aka a bottle of wine. But then they're also low water use, specialty crop with significant economic impact. Talk more about this. What strikes you about that? The value add that we can bring to the wine grapes, the economic contribution. I believe the latest study is saying something like $4.24 billion to our economy here in Arizona.
Yeah, it's quite a bit. So they're efficient as a crop in terms of water use. They don't use a lot of water, but they're efficient in terms of economic return, especially where we're at here in Clarkdale. The Verde Valley's got this economic ecosystem built around wineries. So that water use in the vineyard translates not only to growing some wine grapes that we can sell for a considerable amount, although it does take a lot to grow them. It helps other businesses. It helps tourism, the hospitality, the restaurants, all of those things. If you go down through Old Town Cottonwood or here in Clarkdale or Jerome, you see the impact of the wine industry. The same is true down in Wilcox. It's a farming community and has been for decades. But the wine growing has actually started to, really be a boon to those rural parts of the state where really Arizona needs it the most. So it's efficient water use, but it's also efficient in just kind of churning that business engine in rural Arizona.
Right. And you guys are some of the movers and shakers of this. I know that you got inspired by others that came before you. In fact, it's not really a question I sent to you earlier, but who inspired you the most? When you were here, you've been in Arizona for quite some time, but of all the winemakers in the business now, who are your inspirations?
Well, I still get inspired. Actually, I was lucky enough to have a conversation with Kent Callaghan yesterday. And I've known him for a few years now, and every time I hear him speak, I learn something about the past. He's been around so long, and having that institutional knowledge of what's happened in Arizona. You talk to a grower who's done it for 10 years, they'll give you a pretty concise list of the 5 varieties that do well. Those conversations are so valuable. And when we first started, those conversations weren't as obvious or as, common. Now, I can talk to Jesse Noble at Merkin Vineyards, and there's a lot to pull from all of what he's learned here. What Maynard's doing in Cottonwood, he's kind of changed the landscape here quite a bit. It's nice to talk to our friends down the road at Chateau Tumbleweed. There's a lot of good wine, and there's a lot of knowledge there. So I think you don't have to look far for inspiration now.
I'd love to talk to almost all of them, but then I wouldn't be talking to my other farmers and ranchers that I want to talk to as well. But I think right now it ranks at about 120 winemakers or vineyards.
That's about it.
Yeah.
Over 100 now.
Yeah, over 100. So, and it's just, even the time that I've been at Arizona Farm Bureau, which is now in my 18th year, I've gotten to see that 20-year evolution in just this 20 years, but the history of wine in Arizona is actually a lot older and longer than what most people realize. I mean, the Spanish, conquistadors or explorers, when they came in, and then the Spanish missionaries, they planted vineyards in the 1600s. So it's been around for quite some time.
But not only that, it's just as a native crop.
Yeah.
Vitis Arizonica is here. You go down to either Oak Creek or the Verde Valley, and there's grapes that are growing everywhere. So we have the climate here, and people don't find that as obvious as it really is. It makes sense. Wine grapes like a dry, warm climate, and that's why we can grow 18 varieties. It's because we can ripen them. They love this environment. And to me, having done it so long, it's kind of obvious. To other folks, they're used to the California thing, and it's like, well, you're not California. How can you do it? And it's like, well, we have the climate for it.
Right. Yeah. And to tell a little bit more about you, which you probably don't like me to focus on you, but I want to mention that you're part of the Yavapai County Farm Bureau Board, correct, for Yavapai County. And you also now work for Extension, but you are also director for the Yavapai Wine College. So you're kind of busy. Yeah,
it's been nice to be a part of all of that. A lot of the graduates who went through Yavapai College are now the leaders in the industry.
Yeah.
I always like to say the average age of student is 48 because that sets the baseline of who we're talking about. It's not really college students. These are adults who have a background in something else, and they're ready to apply for their next project in life. And so I think of people like Vino Stash, Brook-Eyed, 1764, Omphalos. I mean, some of these are now established award-winning wineries, and they all came through Yavapai College. Cochise College now is also starting a program.
That's right. I need to mention that a little bit more. I haven't, but Cochise County, okay.
Yeah, and each of these are big steps. And I can understand why Cochise College, they've seen what's happened up here at Yavapai. It's a technical degree, and we could do stuff online, and the most we could deliver online and at a distance we could. But you don't want to break, what we have, which is these great learning labs of coming in there, seeing what it's like to prune, feel it, knowing what the sun feels like, driving a tractor. And it's only helpful to have that in place. And unfortunately, down in Cochise County, it's so far away that they need to have their own established program.
And a different style of teaching because of that.
I would think so, yeah.
Yeah. Emil Mullen, who has Cove Mesa, went through your school, and he just swears by it. And look what he and his wife Cindy are doing with their Cove Mesa vineyard. And so it's very inspiring to see some of the people that the college has brought up and that are now fully embedded in the industry. And they are also a profile of what you're talking about. They both had very important, serious careers. He in the legal world, and I think Cindy was an engineer. And I even have talked to Emil. I interviewed him on the live, but then even offline, just chatting with him, he said, yeah, we liked wine and we wanted to see if we could do it. And going through the Yavapai College system allowed him to kind of say, okay, maybe I can do
possible.
This. Yeah, it is possible. So talk a little bit more about the terroir in Wilcox and why it's such a value proposition in terms of growing the grapes, the soil. And we do have 3 AVAs, Arizona.
American,
yeah.
Viticultural area.
Yeah. Verde Valley, where we're at right now, Wilcox, and then Santa Cruz?
Sonoita, which is in Santa Cruz County.
Santa Cruz. So talk about why we are growing so many grapes in Wilcox.
The climate's great, which we've established. Land is more available down there, and the soil's right. The amount of water we need for wine grapes is there. We know that. The soils are kind of lean, which for some other crops you would think, well, that's not what we want. We want rich soils. Not so much for wine grapes. Not only does the climate kind of force the vines to work, we've got well-draining soils. They like to say grapes don't want their feet wet. So it needs to drain well, but you need the right amount of organic material in there so it can be happy, healthy grapevines. And we have that in that soil type. The high elevation, of course, creates those big temperature swings, which also makes the vines work and creates nice, hearty, flavorful grapes. It's not a glamorous place to grow because high wind, air movement's good for vines. I always like to say, think about like high desert herbs or something, kind of that dried, warm kind of flavor. That's what you'll get from our wines. I mean, the wines really do taste just like that place. Yeah, and when you're there, it's almost like the wines are complementing the overall feel of the climate. So we make really good whites that are nice and refreshing and flavorful. Right now it's June. I mean, think of having a nice cool Arizona white wine.
Right.
And we make these nice pretty white wines that taste like the place and are just refreshing for where you're at.
That's neat. And it goes back, you've said something similar. I remember Eric Glomsky saying the same thing. It's about place. Wine is about place. I'm paraphrasing there, but so in doing my research on you and your family, there was this issue about reviving neglected crops, circle vineyards, and the challenges you faced bringing that all back to health. What's that story?
Yeah. Well, it took hard work. I helped my parents as much as I could. You know, having that 300-mile distance between the Verde Valley and Wilcox makes it tough.
Yeah, because you're up here and they're down in Wilcox.
Yeah. So I got to be careful to not take more credit than is due. It was them that revived it. And when we talk about revive, we're saying restructuring entire blocks, replanting. Right now, the majority of the vines that are there, we planted. So it's very much become our vineyard. It had suffered about 3 or 4 years of neglect, no water, no pruning, you know. And at the time, it's like, oh man, this place is in rough shape. It's one of those blessings in disguise because it's like, that allowed us to take it over. We needed to come in there and revive it. Now it's ours. So, you know, a long time has transpired since 2011, and we grow blocks for specific wines. We've planted things for specific wines, and now it's as if it's our place. It's no longer what it once was.
Neat. So the investment you made in the place that you're at, it actually had some wine grapes previously. Okay. And reviving those. Oh, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into that then. Yeah.
In years, it just takes time. Patience is a big part of that. It had all the water and the infrastructure, and there was a lot of opportunity to grow. So that's why we were like, oh, we can see ourselves kind of expanding through this place. And I'm glad we made that jump.
That's neat. One thing that, you know, getting back to the grapes themselves, it's almost like they need to go through a little stress and a little pain to produce quality wine grapes.
That's true.
Is that true?
Yeah. A lot of the produce that we get at the grocery store, you know, those big plump strawberries, they've had everything they need, all the water, all the nitrogen, and they're perfect in color. They look pretty. It makes you want to pick them up and buy them. But it doesn't necessarily make the best wine. We actually want wine with character. The last thing I want my wine to be is boring. So it needs to have character. It needs to taste like a place. It needs to be exciting. It needs to make you think about it when you're drinking. And having grapes that have been through something, it's kind of crazy. But they always say the best wine is grown right on the cusp of where you can't do it anymore. You know, and, it needs to have enough to be able to produce fruit. Because its job is to produce fruit that birds want to come eat and go disperse the seeds. So we're kind of using that plant biology in our favor to make nice, flavorful things that we're going to turn into wine.
So interesting. So how do you engage visitors to enhance their visit to Bodega Piers?
I think the most important thing is talk about the why. They know what. They know they were going into a tasting room, and then they're going to learn about which wines we make. So it's not the what, it's the why we do it. I hear a lot about people going into Wilcox, and my parents are there. My dad comes in from the vineyard, and they tell the story of why they're there. A lot of times when my dad has time, he'll take them out to the vineyard, and they get to understand why he's out there doing it. But the what is not as intriguing as to, you know, the intrinsic value to the people doing it. So I think that story is really resonates with people.
Wow, I like that. How has the family dynamic contributed to the success of Bodega Piers? And what roles do the three of you play in the day to day? I mean, you've almost kind of shared it because your parents are down in Wilcox and they're boots on the ground with the vines on a more consistent day to day, but kind of explain a little bit more about the dynamic between your parents and you, and you up here and them down there.
Another one of those things just kind of evolved over time. I'm not sure that we sat down and wrote it down or had a conversation about it. It just kind of made sense based on my dad loves being on the tractor. He loves doing that stuff, and he gravitated towards it. When you're an owner, you can kind of put yourself wherever you want in the company.
Sure.
That was just like an obvious thing, and he wanted to work with that. I was living up here. I was working for wineries up in the Verde Valley. We saw the dynamic of kind of fruit grown in the southeast and then taking advantage of people in the Verde Valley. So we looked for this place to find a winery, and naturally it made sense for me to kind of keep going with what I had the experience of doing, which was making wine.
Are you making the wine up here in the Verde Valley? So the grapes are growing in Wilcox. You're shipping them 300 miles up here.
Yes.
So all winemaking is occurring in the Verde Valley. And it's not just because you're here. There's a vibe up here, maybe. I heard that comment. Most of the grapes are growing in Wilcox, but wow, a lot of, not that it's not taking place down there either, but wow, a lot of the actual winemaking from the wine grapes is occurring here. What's causing that? Or can we pinpoint that?
I think a lot of things. Arizona is a diverse state, which is great. Right. There's wines that are growing here in the Verde Valley, and they are unique. That's what I always like to tell people. It's like, come taste the wines here. You'll get to taste this place. People don't realize that the Verde Valley is actually the warmest growing region, even though it's north of Phoenix. People think you go up in elevation, which is true. The southeast is actually even higher than we are here.
Yeah, and we don't think about that. That's true.
So we'll in the Verde Valley, we will harvest first here. Wilcox will be second, and then Sonoita is actually last.
Okay.
This road here, 89A, there's just cars going by nonstop. It's on the road up to Jerome. We're right next to Sedona. So the amount of tourism that comes through here is quite a bit more than in Wilcox. I will say both in Wilcox and Sonoita, you feel that you're in the wine region. You feel that you're in the growing region. So the vibes are totally different. If you want to eat at a nice restaurant, there's plenty to choose from here. There's plenty of places to stay. Right. If you want to go down there and see natural beauty, you can go to the Chiricahuas, you can go to Kartchner Caverns, you can then stop at the wine regions. I mean, you go through Sonoita and it's like you're going through rolling hills and it's beautiful. So the vibes are totally different. The wines are unique. And I think the wine industry should really just embrace that. That's why we can grow 18 varieties. Like Arizona wine is not any one thing. It's really like this whole spectrum of different things. And everybody can find something that kind of works for them, either in style of wine or the vibe they want. Some people might want to go hiking and go down to Wilcox and enjoy that open space. If you want to stay at a med spa in Sedona, you can come here and taste your wine. It's just a totally different vibe.
It is. So you said something, I've never thought of this. You said the wine grapes created, again, we're tasting place, created totally different taste here than if you're going to make from wine grapes here in the Verde Valley than in Wilcox and then even in Sonoita. Would you dare even to describe some of the distinctions from the Verde Valley to Wilcox to?
The best I can. I've got a limited exposure. I made wine here at the Southwest Wine Center for 11 years, so I've had plenty of Verde Valley wine making. Quite a bit riper. That warmth really pushes the sugar higher, pushes the fruit forward.
In the Verde Valley.
Verde Valley, yeah.
Okay. The fruit forward, okay.
Yeah, so much more fruity, red, ripe flavors. Wilcox, as you start to get a little bit cooler, you get a little bit more of that tannin, a little bit more of that grip, a little bit more of that dry desert herb kind of character.
Okay, cool.
Where I don't have experience, and maybe sometime in the future I'll be able to have experience is Sonoita. There's smaller plantings there, and it's usually kind of owner-operator gets to take that fruit. So I think people would buy from Sonoita if the fruit was available.
Okay. How interesting. Yeah, that I never thought of that. That is so fascinating. So I'm going to pause for station identification. If anybody's joined us live and they have any questions for Michael, please give a shout, post it in the comments, and no promise that we can always answer all questions, right? But we'll try. Thanks for joining the live if you're with us. And then we do save this to the Instagram account, and we also put it up on Arizona Farm Bureau's website, azfb.org. We're actually putting this in a whole group series. I believe you're our 7th winemaker,
Cool.
Wine grower that we've interviewed. So it will be on our web, and that's permanent, especially for my colleagues and friends that say, well, Julie, I'm not on Instagram, which always seems so rare, but there are a few of you. I want to make it available to everyone. So just know that if you have a comment, you can post it. What are some of the experimental wines produced under your label or the family label? And then how do they differ from the main Bodega Pierce offerings?
Yeah. Well, we very intentionally have 2 different labels for that purpose.
Okay.
Bodega Pierce kind of follows more of kind of a traditional style. We grow specific blocks for specific lines. Chardonnay, always do this in neutral barrel. Every year we've got a style there we like, so we grow the fruit for that. The Pandora, our Pinot Gris, is grown specifically for that blend. Notice we've got Muscat of Alexandria. This is in the Saculum label. Won't do that every year when the fruit is right. It's kind of a variety most people don't know about. I feel
This one?
right here. So Muscat of Alexandria is an ancient variety.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and I do it in a dry style.
Okay.
People see the Muscat and they assume that it's sweet. This allows us to kind of explain to them the diversity of wine and that things can be all sorts of things. As soon as they taste that, they love that wine and it sells really well.
I think I'm going to buy a bottle of that and take it home.
We can make that happen.
Okay.
I find that the Saculum allows us to kind of color outside the lines a little bit. If something comes up, let's just do it. There's no structure there that we're forced. So it could be an orange wine, it could be a co-ferment.
The science and the art of winemaking.
That's right.
That is so cool. So that's why you on purpose created 2 different labels.
Mm-hmm. They feed off of one another. When you have 18 varieties, it's not that we make 18 wines. We actually make more than that because we've got blends, we've got rosés.
That's true.
Okay. We could make a Malvasia in stainless steel, or we could ferment it on skins. Character will be totally different.
Yeah.
And then, the wine market also is pretty unique. When we sell right here in our tasting room, customers in front of us, we can tell them all about it and they can ask questions. When it's on a store shelf, and the Bodega Pierce does get distributed, it's a totally different engagement with the consumer. So, and
they might not even have a clue behind what you did with this wine in this bottle, for example.
Yeah.
Wow. So you could theoretically, with 18 different grape varieties, have an endless amount of different wines that you craft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as a winemaker, I enjoy that because I get to do all of that. Now, there's the marketing challenge of, you've got 25 things this year. How do you market it? I find our wine club loves that, though. And that's why we've got those different tiers. When they come in, there's always something different on the menu.
And do you host for your wine club members some dinners, like periodically, or?
Twice a year we have releases. We actually just had our cheese day this last weekend where we brought in very specific cheeses with different wines, and then we released a library wine. So there's a lot of different fun things we can do. Yeah.
And then that's another way for them to really get a sense of what you tried to do with that wine for that year. But now I'm assuming, just because of the popularity of them, obviously there's always going to be your Chardonnay, right?
Yeah, that's our hope. This one's a tough one. It's right on the edge of our vineyard, and it tends to get frost, which is one of the large growing concerns we have. People think it's too hot in Arizona, but it's actually that cold is more of a threat to us.
Okay.
That April time, right as the buds start to come out, and if we get anything below kind of 29, 28, we're going to have frost damage.
So are there going to be years when you don't have
unfortunately,
Chardonnay produced?
Yeah.
Wow. So how does Bodega Pierce balance maintaining a small, intimate operation with the growing demand for Arizona wines? Because I do think that our Arizona wine is getting more popular. It's not a lot of people, and that's why we're doing what we're doing, just don't get it. They're not, especially here in the state of Arizona, they're not really, and they might be native, they don't realize the quality of the wines that we're producing. We still have a little bit of that marketing hurdle to go over. So how do you balance that between knowing how much the wine industry in Arizona is growing, and yet you want that intimacy and that small family feel of bodega peers?
We still just have to tell the story. It's true. Sometimes they walk in and the bar's low. Well, we'll jump straight up and over that bar. That's not an. I have confidence in our wine, and I'm happy to put it next to any other wine from any other region. So that's not a challenge there. It's just getting people to know about it. So even though we've been here for 15 years, we still see the same questions. A lot of people come from outside the state. There's a lot of tourism to the Verde Valley here or to Wilcox. The snowbirds, people coming for baseball or whatever it is. So they've just never heard of it, and we're starting at square one. So just keep telling the story. In terms of growth, it's not always about making more. It's also about growth and doing better. Better in the vineyard. We don't use herbicide. We've been able to manage our ground cover. We've adopted new techniques to watch water use, all those sorts of things. Better engagement with the community. So it's not just about more wine. It's about telling your story better. That's an important form of growth, I think.
So you had people that come in and the bar is really low for them on wine. They may not, their favorite is still box wine. What have been some of the craziest questions you've got from people if they've happened to come in for a wine tasting? Or is that even fair to ask? Maybe. No question is. Yeah. Every question is valuable.
It's true. Yeah, we want to break down that pretension, which unfortunately, follows the wine industry around. We're not a pretentious tasting room, so ask the question. Of all of our wines, we'll find something that you like, or it'll be something that will be new. So I'm not worried about that. I'm not in the taste room much, so you're getting the B team asking that question. I can tell you about the winemaking. Yeah, my parents, because they do the taste room in Wilcox, they engage much more than I do.
They could probably tell us some interesting questions. So on the winemaking side of it, which takes a lot more science, you had already been obviously gone through your own education with winemaking, and then you became the director for the Southwest Wine Center. But has there been an evolution? Because I think you said you did that for 11 years. What have you seen today in the winemaking industry versus even 11 years ago?
A lot of things in the vineyard. We've learned to get our canopies up and open, shade the fruit zone, make sure you're not overbearing your crop, meaning not having too many clusters on there, because when the monsoon rains hit, you need to have nice, good airflow. Keeping your ground cover, it helps when we do get the rains to keep the water right there, keeps the dust down, actually outcompetes the weeds. So there's all sorts of little things that over the years we've, I think, collectively started to understand about growing here. The textbooks that you can get, they weren't written about Arizona viticulture. So we're kind of slowly doing that research. And now's the time when I think we can start formalizing some of that knowledge. In terms of winemaking, I think we were trying to emulate other places because there wasn't that frame of reference now. Now I think we're doing lower alcohol wines, things that are more acid focused, that are more complementary to food, a little bit more delicate. They're more nuanced. So I think we're not that California style that's just oaky and alcoholic and concentrated. It's its own thing, and I think we should really celebrate what we've created.
I recall walking through, I can't remember which vineyard it was, but because I've been to quite a few, and a lot of it's being done or has been done, just the pruning, and I noticed so many grape clusters on the ground. I thought, oh my gosh, you feel like that's such a waste.
It is so important. Let me tell you, teaching students, they will not cut, even when it comes to just pruning the vegetative.
They just can't. That's a beautiful cluster of grapes.
It is quality over quantity, and those who try to play another game, they get hit. As soon as the monsoon rain comes, you get bunch rot, it's not ripening,
Oh, yeah.
your acids aren't there. You got to have a balance. If you have a balance in your vine, you're going to have a balance in your wine. So our goal is to grow chemistry right there with the grapevine to where the winemaker is basically doing very little. We use microbiology to turn it into wine, and other than that, it's a stable product.
So maybe after the students' first monsoon, when they didn't trim enough and they saw the rotting clusters, after that they were cured.
Sometimes it takes more than 1 year, but yeah. But those are the things you can't replicate online.
Yeah.
So you got to get them in the vineyard and seeing their results. It's like, okay, I pruned that vine. I see what we got. And maybe their result's great.
Yeah. Well, and your point to that strikes me about something that my dad experienced when he started, and this was in the 70s, with growing pistachios here in Arizona, and now look what Wilcox has. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those 40-plus mature pistachio orchards, he probably either sold them the seedlings or went through there and tea-budded the fruit stock on. Mm-hmm. So and how I don't know, but a man from Iran that used to, and this was in the 70s, used to take care of orchards, and he came and looked at ours, and we did a lot of trimming. He said, "Oh my gosh, you're killing the tree. That's too much trimming." Well, when Dad dug into it a little bit more, because back there apparently they're like bushes. Well, we have a long trunk and a huge, beautiful canopy. Well, we can get the shakers in there. They can use labor.
That's
so just mechanizing impacts how you're going to take care of those. And it worked better here in the stateside, for us to have a long, elegant trunk, a beautiful canopy up top. They can bring those mechanical shakers, shake the nuts when they're ready for harvest. So when you made the comment that we have to grow our vines for Arizona's climate.
Yeah, absolutely. And even, Wilcox, everything's planted east-west, which is not a traditional way of doing it, just to manage your sun exposure.
Okay.
It's east-west because there's some strong winds that come through there. So if you read the book from California, you'd be going the wrong way and your canopy would just be getting blasted
And destroyed.
What's right for Wilcox is not necessarily going to be what's right for the Verde Valley. And we're now starting to have that frame of reference, which is going to be really important.
Imagine you're on the podium speaking to thousands of Arizonans, and what do you want to tell them about Arizona wine? And especially if maybe they don't really have a clue. Maybe we grow wine grapes in Arizona. We're crafting and making wonderful wine. What would you tell somebody?
Just come and try it. Come enjoy it and let it be the best part of your week. Have the experience. Bring your significant other, bring your friends. One thing alcohol does is it brings people together. When your friend from college comes into town, what are you going to do? You're going to have a glass of wine and sit down and talk to them, reconnect with them. So let that be your opportunity to bring somebody into the tasting room and have that experience. Unfortunately, too much we're in the digital world, and let that be a break. Come do some tourism in rural Arizona, see what's growing where, and just enjoy that experience.
Check out and leave the cell phone in the car locked, and
enjoy your time.
Don't look at the screen. Well, Michael Pierce, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for being part of this wine series that Arizona Farm Bureau has been hosting here on Talk to a Farmer, Talk to a Rancher, Talk to a Wine Grower. And we have been so blessed and learned so much. We've got at least one more, possibly two more interviews. And like I said, that whole compilation of everybody's interviews will be on Arizona Farm Bureau's website, azfb.org. You'll be there as well. Thanks again.
Thanks for being here.